Hi, so I didn't want to continue with the things we've already discussed in class and the works that we've already read. I wanted to branch out and see how the themes we've talked about and concepts we've talked about in class relate to things I've seen in the media and popular culture, and specifically in television. Because I find that a lot of what we read makes me think about things I've seen in movies and TV shows, because literature isn't always as popular with the younger crowd. So I always look for connections to be made. Not even always look for, because they just pop into my head sometimes. So a main theme that we've discussed this term has been identity, from authors like Allen Ginsberg and Gwendolyn Brooks, John Cheever, Ralph Ellison, Grace Paley, Jack Kerouac, James Baldwin, Audre Lorde, Joy Harjo, and Gloria Anzalado. I think I'm saying that wrong, but a lot of what we read has discussed and portrayed identity and the character's confusion, or their pride in their identity. It's so many aspects when we think of identity. So when we read Gwendolyn Brooks' Kitchenette Building, I immediately thought of Zeke's poem, I Am the One, from the Netflix show The Get Down, and I had this written down in my notebook for weeks now, so I'm excited to finally talk about it. But The Get Down on Netflix was a show following the life of teenagers living in the Bronx in the 1970s. So you have that aspect of poverty, of drug use, of the rise of popular music, and you see Zeke as someone who has separate identities, because on one side he's trying to have fun with his friends and make music, and then on the other side you have someone who's hardworking and has a good internship and is trying to get a reference letter for school. So you just see him struggling with two separate identities that don't need to clash together, and they just take up his time of who he wants to be in the future and who he is now with his friends. But in one of the episodes, he had to read a poem for class, and I believe he acts like he didn't write the poem, just because he didn't want to show off his academic skills to his classmates. But his teacher knows that he wrote the poem, so she makes him stay after class and he recites it to her. So I'm just going to read what he wrote. Zeke's poem, I Am the One. Boom, then crash, the shattering of glass. I dive to the floor, busting my ass. The hell was that, was all that I say. Then I see the pool of blood. Then I see my mom, she's dead. No emotion in the commotion. I wasn't even sad, even when I learned the bullet was meant for my dad. Vietnam made Pops crazy. He was already half dead. So why couldn't that have been him they shot in the head? All the news that fits the print. Mama's death went unreported, not a whiff or word or hint. They don't care about us because that's how my Pops proclaimed it, but I didn't know I was it till my dad proclaimed it. Sorry, I'm bleeping out the N-word. 6 months later, my Pops is dead too. Drug-related shots fired, his skin turned cold blue. On the news that night, the president's wife got a new hairdo. The news guy said, I like it, how about you? No word about my Pops in the Post or on CBS. Why was that, you ask? Take a fucking guess. And yeah, why is that? That's what politicians should be asking. But who's got time for questions when you all skiing up on Aspen? Broads get gunshots to the head, and all y'all serving us is aspirin. My mama's so lovely, she'd have made your head spin. Level the playing field, and y'all will see who really win. And yeah, I got anger, but I don't let it take me down. My mama taught me better, and she holds me up when I fall down. Rest in peace, moms. Don't worry about your son. Someday I'll make you proud, because yeah, I am the one. So his poem really resonated with kitchen building, because you see in that poem the description of the building and the poverty you see. And then when you think of Zeke in this show, you see how the Bronx is filled with violence and poverty. And in both poems, the speaker is very aware of their environment. Zeke says, no emotion in the commotion. I wasn't even sad, even when I learned the bullet was meant for my dad. He's not even sad about his mother's death because he's witnessed so much violence around him that he's used to the cruelty, and that's not how it should be. Here you have him learning of his identity because his pops explained it to him. So he's very aware of how a black man will be treated in society and how they're viewed and how they have to struggle and fight, twice as hard to be just as good as their white peers. And he didn't know that until his father said that. So here's him becoming aware of how race affects his identity. And then these last two parts I have highlighted, and yeah, I got anger, makes me think that he wasn't sad about his parents' death, but more so angry. And I think anger plays a part in his identity and a lot of people's identity because they're just angry at their situation. They're not even sad. They're just angry that they're there. And they don't know how to escape from their environment. And someday I'll make you proud because, yeah, I'm the one. I highlighted this because this also adds to his identity of him trying to be better and using his internship to try to get away. He's struggling still, but he is trying, and he's trying to make his mom proud. So in the end, the hardships that he's faced are pushing him to succeed. But overall, this was an amazing poem, and you can search Zeke's poem on YouTube and listen to the character read it, and it's really amazing. So moving on to Ginny's poem from Ginny in Georgia. When we read How to Tame a Wild Tongue this week, this made me think of Ginny's poem, specifically because How to Tame a Wild Tongue deals with the questioning of identity and judgment from others in your own culture and outside of your culture. And it also deals with the lack of representation in literature and learning and diversity in learning. And I see all of that in the show Ginny in Georgia, specifically in the first episode because Ginny is biracial. Her mom is white and her dad is black. So her first day in her AP English class, her teacher makes a comment that he doesn't think, she'll be able to keep up because he keeps a rigorous pace, and that she should probably move to a regular English class so she doesn't stress herself out. And he continues on to talk to the class about the Crucible, which they were supposed to read over the summer, and how they're going to have a pop quiz. And he singles her out, saying that he hadn't expected her to read it, instead of just asking her, did she ever read the Crucible? So here you have her being judged strictly on her identity because he doesn't know her abilities. It's her first day in class at this new school, but he's already judging her and putting her down just because of how she looks. So Ginny sarcastically tells him when she's looking at the syllabus that of the 16 books they're going to read in that class, 15 were written by white people, 14 by white men. Only one black author, which she guesses will be read during Black History Month. So the teacher is kind of shocked that, she says something, and she sarcastically tells him that they're only learning about the viewpoint of the white male, and she doesn't think that she'll be stimulated intellectually. And yes, she's read the Crucible, and yes, she can successfully take the pop quiz. So he's kind of angry that she says that. But I love that moment of the show because you have her being proud of who she is and in her abilities. But I relate this back to How to Tame a Wild Tongue, because still you just have that lack of diversity in learning. And even when she mentions it, he just dismisses her. But you also have teachers who view minority students as unable instead of giving them a fair chance. And that's what we saw in both works. So that's what I saw in both works. So Ginny reads a poem in one of the episodes for her assignment, and here's her poem. Growing up, I thought people were born with their heads cocked because that's how they've always looked at me. Boxes. Check one, check other. People don't know. They don't furrow between the layers like I do. They don't switch and twitch and actively make the decision of which part of me belongs today, which aspect of my personality will offend the least and blend the most, and work and succeed and bury the lead like a switchboard of traits that decide my fate. And I'm always an imposter. Always lost, always asking for directions, and people point my way like the scarecrow, like tornadoes, blowing me whichever way the wind blows. Well, Dorothy doesn't want to play today. She's prepping for the SAT, just the Scantron. The box is empty and glaring and daring me to choose one. Well, I'm an expert at boxes. My whole life can fit inside it, and I've got it down to a science. I can pack my entire identity in an hour, 'cause where there's roots, there's power, but I'm all topsoil. My blood runs like water and oil refusing to stick. My dad's old books, read in secret nooks, that camera that locks all my memories in a flash, saves for when my recollection doesn't last. That lighter that sparked that fire, often in a box ready to be carried from door to door. But that's not the kind of box people ever ask for. So many lines in the sand, so many can'ts and cans. I see both worlds so clearly, and I skip and jump and dance and fall between, never seen. I belong in the spaces between, check all that may apply. So I really liked this episode. This was episode 8 when she read this poem. And here I have highlighted this first part because this just proves that she questions who she is and how she's supposed to see herself and how she's supposed to act around each race, because if she acts a certain way, she's not going to be accepted. And if she pretends to be too much of one race, then it's going to be an issue and someone's going to be offended. So I really relate this to How to Tame a Wild Tongue, because specifically when she's talking about language, you have her experiencing and questioning which variation of the language she's supposed to speak when she's around certain people and in certain areas, and it's just, you can't even just be yourself. She's prepping for the SAT, just the Scantron. Just checking off the box of her identity is so much for her. And she says the box is empty and glaring and daring me to choose one, because she's still struggling with her identity and how the world sees her and how she sees herself, and who is she supposed to be? Who can she identify with? How can she identify with one race when she's a mix of both? And continuing on with this last part I have highlighted, my blood runs like water and oil refusing to stick. She has these two races in her that clash together and pit her against others when they don't want to see her as both, or they don't want to see her as just one or the other. And I think if you haven't seen the show, if you want to watch it, you're going to understand a lot of her struggles with her identity, of who she is and how she's supposed to act, because you just see a lot of her pining for attention and acceptance from others, and you can just really understand and not even relate, because not all of us are mixed to understand what she goes through, but just watching it, like, you really just get the sense of this confusion. And from reading How to Tame a Wild Tongue, I got that same sense of confusion and an overwhelming feeling, and I can't imagine how frustrating it is for these speakers to actually be in the situation and be living these lives of, they don't know their identity and they're struggling with it, and they get backlash for just trying to be themselves. So again, I just wanted to read Zeke's poem and Ginny's poem from Netflix shows, because I like relating what we learn in class and themes and stuff we talk about, and how I can identify those themes in popular culture, because I do think it's important to not only identify what we learn in literature, but what we learn everywhere, because everything is a learning experience. So thank you for listening.